Hey guys, it's Mike here, and throughout the Dragon Ball community, there are a number of varied takes with regard to different opinions far and wide, from new fans and old alike. Throughout the course of these opinions and these varied ideas, there are a number of what we like to call hot takes. Things that pretty much every time you say them, it makes the internet explode. And so, because of that, I decided to compile 10 of them here today, many of which I've heard over the years, or some which I came up with myself. Some of them I agree with, and other ones, well, you'll have to just wait and see along the way. But before I begin getting into that list, if you guys are new here, or if you're longtime fans, make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications. That way, when YouTube doesn't show you my content throughout the course of the year at different points, you'll still be able to see it in your subscription feed and on my channel, and let them know that I am going to be in your feed, in your vision. Hopefully, I won't burn your eyes with these hot takes, though, but we'll have to see. But with that being said, let's get into this right now, as I have this list compiled, and as you guys will see, this is one that is quite varied. And I'm going to try and go, let's say, in ascending order of temperature along the way, starting with what I think is probably the least hot take, but who knows? Depending upon who you are, some of these should be at the top for you, others for you, you're just gonna be like, this is straight facts, straight cold, no chill. Beginning with, well, what about Yamcha? Yamcha isn't weak. And so on that topic, as you can see right here, I actually did a video years ago called Why Yamcha Isn't Weak. There are many people throughout the fandom, hardcore fans and just casuals who've only slightly heard of Dragon Ball, that will associate Yamcha with, well, weakness. A character that loses every time he fights and just isn't anything compared to any of the other characters. He is weakness personified, but in reality, that's not true. Yamcha is actually incredibly powerful. He continues to get stronger as the franchise goes on, to the point to where he could easily defeat pretty much every character in Dragon Ball Z by the time where we are in Dragon Ball Super. I mean, we see that Yamcha trains in the lead up to the Cell games. We see that in the Buu Saga, he's able to defeat a Buu, who was able to go against a suppressed and weighted clothing wearing Pikkon, who easily defeated Super Perfect Cell. And not just that, but then Super, he's fighting against Moro's henchmen, who have been instilled with Moro's energy that he went around the universe, putting himself to the maximum, taking him to where he could fight against Ultra Instinct Goku, and Yamcha is able to fight against henchmen that are fighting against Goku's higher Super Saiyan forms at the time. And those henchmen are arguably weaker than the ones that Yamcha was fighting here based upon, well, the progression of the arc. Again, this character's got stronger and stronger. He could probably destroy not just planets, but also galaxies, hell, even universes at this point in time, most likely. That's how ridiculous the power of Yamcha has become, and really power scaling in Dragon Ball in general. And, well, even the so-called weak character, well, he isn't quite anywhere near as weak as many people make him out to be. Now, the next one I'm going to get into is something else related to Goku. And that is the idea that Goku is a bad father. So another hot take to say, funny enough, is that Goku is actually, well, a good father. He isn't a terrible, neglectful, just abusive, or whatever other type of father people make him out to be. No, Goku in the story is somebody who actually does the best job he possibly can. And in universe, I would have to agree, Goku is not a bad father. In fact, he's a good one. I mean, after all, Goku died for his son and for his friends, as you could see right here in the Cell Saga. He sacrificed himself multiple times for Gohan, his family, and everyone else. He sacrificed himself against Raditz to save Gohan the Earth, and he sacrificed himself against Cell, again, to save Gohan after Gohan messed up. He made Gohan as prepared as he possibly could to take on the villain, and also in order to, well, be the protector in the future. And then he selflessly sacrificed himself yet again by choosing not to return to life after this, which I'll again get into very soon. No spoilers ahead though, guys. But with that being said, as I've talked about, Goku, well, that's really more of a hot take, funny enough to say that he is a good father, but really, like, he does the best he can. Goku didn't have a father really in his life, unless you want to say Bardock biologically for like 2 seconds that they shared on screen together, and then, Grandpa Gohan. Most of his life, he was alone. He didn't have a strong masculine role model figure to, basically teach him how to be a father. He had people along the way like mentors, masters like Roshi and Kami and King Kai and stuff, but none of them were really fathers who were able to make it to where Goku was fully prepared. So by the time that he became a father, well, he wasn't really well versed on what to do. And yet he still did the best he could. He still protected his children. He protected his family by literally fighting threats that would destroy the entire planet and universe on top of that. And, it goes on and on. Like, Goku doesn't get drunk and beat his family. He doesn't do all these horrible things that a real bad father would do in real life. Instead, he does the best that he can, even though he, again, is a Saiyan. So for Saiyan standards, he's the father of the century, the father of the millennium, the father of the species, basically, along with Vegeta, insofar as he's actually a good father by a number of different standards and metrics, even though people like to compare him to like Shinji's dad in, Evangelion or Jing from Hunter x Hunter and say that he's a bad dad up there. Nah, there are way worse dads in anime fiction and in real life. And so I would say I agree with this hot take as well. The next one comes down to another hot take regarding the saga where Goku returned to life. The idea that the Buu Saga is the worst arc of the original Dragon Ball manga and of Dragon Ball Z. And in terms of the original manga, I guess it depends on, what we're talking about in terms of, let's say, the worst, in terms of the highest level of quality. For me, I don't know that I would necessarily say in terms of overall, it's necessarily the worst of the original manga, going from the arc where Goku met Bulma originally and started the story up until the very end of this arc. You could definitely make the argument in terms of writing, in terms of power scaling, in terms of the main villain, in terms of a lot of things. You can try and make a strong argument that perhaps the Buu Saga is the worst. And certain people have done that in the past, like, for example, Mr. Fusion over on his channel, when he did Dragon Ball Dissection, he ranked all of them, and he gave his own thoughts about that. In terms of Dragon Ball Z, though, I would definitely agree. The Saiyan Saga, the Frieza Saga, and the Cell Saga are all significantly better. They have better main villains, they have better storytelling, just in general, better told, constructed narratives with better top to bottom. There are some great moments in this arc, like, for example, when Vegeta sacrifices himself, as Majin Vegeta. For people who just really like hype moments, you could say Goku becoming a Super Saiyan 3, Gohan achieving Ultimate and showing up to fight against Super Buu, and, a lot of different things like that. Kid Buu versus Goku and blowing up the Earth. Things like that, which are really big heights of the series. Even, Vegito for fans of Fusion, him. And fusion as a concept in general. But overall, I could definitely see the argument for this hot take. And again, it's something that for hardcore Buu Saga fans, well, definitely makes them mad. But I think that things start to escalate significantly after this point, where we get into the next one, which is the idea that Dragon Ball Super is actually worse than Dragon Ball GT. Now, in terms of this, the thing is that, even saying Dragon Ball GT is good, or that you like it, or even that's like your favorite part of the series, is already a hot take in this fandom. People, especially casuals these days, it's all about like, oh, GT isn't canon. Don't you know that? Like, this wasn't made by Akira Toriyama. I mean, Super barely was too, though, even though a lot of people try and make those arguments. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, in some ways you could argue that GT is better than Super. I actually did 2 videos on my channel talking about the 10 things that I like and don't like about Dragon Ball GT, which you guys can see in the top right corner. And the fact of the matter is that GT does have a lot of things to enjoy. There is some great animation. There is some, themes and storytelling along the way, like with Baby, the Shadow Dragons, that is really compelling. Super Saiyan 4, which I think is the best transformation in the franchise, which you could also see in a video in the top right corner. And really, overall, I mean, there's a lot to enjoy. GT also ended. GT felt more in line with the original Dragon Ball Z anime from the 90s. It had that aesthetic, whereas Super, it feels more like, in many ways a contrived revival. But either way, neither one of them was necessarily made for the fact that, was some kind of artistic merit behind it, right? They were both made in order to make money for Toei and Shueisha and Toriyama, of course, make even more money for him at this point. And neither one of them had anywhere near as much investment into them as the original Dragon Ball manga did, where Toriyama was actually drawing it, writing it every single week. And, Toriyama still even said back then his main reason for doing it was money, but it doesn't matter because it still had more artistic merit and strength and better constructed stories and character development, things like that along the way. But this is definitely a hot take to say, whether you like or dislike Super or GT. To say that you prefer GT, well, that's something that makes some people's heads explode. And I'm sure I'm going to see some interesting comments down below with regard to that. Next thing would have to be another one that I have actually talked about in videos in the past, including a video that might be in the top right corner. I might want to recommend some other ones along the way, but I will tell you, the next one is why transformations need to go away. So I actually did a video years ago called Why Dragon Ball Needs to, or Should, I don't recall which one, abandon transformations. And this for me was actually one of my most disliked and controversial videos ever, because so many people in this fandom love transformations. They love the concept, they love the visual change that characters undergo in order to demonstrate the strength improvements that they have, and a lot of those things. But at this point in time, I did a thumbnail with Super Saiyan Green Vegeta, by the way, to showcase everything. And this was even before the Broly movie, where we did see him have green hair and eyebrows and stuff for like a fraction of a second for some reason. That was never explained when he went Super Saiyan Blue. But Blue is a perfect example of one of the problems with transformations now. Most of them are not original, unique, or interesting, or anything other than an excuse to make more merchandise and give the characters a new form just so that they can make something different, because of lazy storytelling. We got Super Saiyan God, which again was kind of just like red hair swap, and Goku's base form got a little thinner in order to introduce the concept of God Ki, where he had it, he was fighting against Beerus, who also had it. Seemed like they were going to change things, but immediately they abandoned that idea. Goku absorbs God into his body, and then he and Vegeta show up in the next movie, literally one movie later, and they've already just moved on from God, and then they in turn have Super Saiyan Blue, which is just a color swap of Super Saiyan, both blue hair and an aura that has a very small tint of yellow around the areas of their body while they have blue. It's, one of the laziest transformations in the franchise, and most of them afterward have also been as well. Like a lot of times it seems like when Dragon Ball kind of writes itself into a corner, well, let's give Goku a new form. Let's give Future Trunks a new form out of nowhere that looks like an inverse of Super Saiyan Blue. Let's give Gohan a new form because he got angry watching Piccolo get beat up again. Let's give Piccolo 2 new forms, And people so many times want to try and have forms be the answer to questions, whether it be in fan fiction. It's like, well, we should give these characters more forms, or the humans should get more forms. It's like, why can't we just write a story that moves forward from these forms, that introduces new concepts and ideas? And yeah, absolutely. I think that this is one that I agree with, because forms have been played out for decades now. Even at the end of the Buu Saga, what did Toriyama do? He introduced Ultimate, which was not supposed to be a form. It was Gohan just bringing out all of his power in his base without transforming. Old Kai even talked down to transformations. And not just that, but Goku, when he fights Kid Buu at the end in Kid Buu's reincarnation, Oob, well, what does he do? He fights him in his base. Toriyama was moving forward and away from the idea of forms, but then they kept bringing him back, and he tried to get out, but they kept pulling him back in with God and Blue and Ultra Instinct, times 2, and then, Ultra Ego and Super Saiyan Blue Evolution, which is also a terrible form, and Trunks' form, and Gohan Blanco, which is actually Gohan Beast Mode, and Piccolo Yellow and Orange, and it keeps going on from there. Broly getting more forms and stuff. So yeah, Dragon Ball moving on and abandoning transformations, that they need to go away. That's a big hot take. That pisses a lot of people off in this fandom. And for me, well, it's one that I agree with. Next up would have to be another one that makes a lot of Goku fans especially angry, but a lot of Gohan fans happy. So, we'll have to see how this fares in the hotness meter, right? But the next one is that Gohan should have remained the main character. Now, I do actually 100% have to show this panel, because every single time I mention that Gohan was the main character, or anyone does, you always have Goku fans showing up and saying Gohan was never the main character. Nobody other than Goku has ever been the main character of the story, which is wrong, because Toriyama himself wrote the manga, and you could see right here, what do we see? Well, the cult of personality. Wait, no, this isn't a CM Punk video. So here you have Gohan, and right next to him on the start of the Buu Saga, what do we see? Master Roshi saying Dragon Ball isn't over yet. Sure, Goku's gone, but that kid of his will take his place. Toriyama, just like when Goku flew away with Chi-Chi at the end of the 23rd tournament, you saw Master Roshi pop up just like this saying, don't worry, the story's not over yet. The same thing is happening right here, but this time, officially, Gohan is being said to be the main character. We even have this next panel right here that shows this, where it says, with Goku's sacrifice, the Earth has escaped disaster. Its people can live in peace once again. Unfortunately, because of human nature, this peace will perish by new criminals. So we see what? Goku putting his hand on Gohan's shoulders as he is the new main character. 7 years later, flying in on what exactly? Kinto-Un, the flying Nimbus. The exact same thing that Goku flew on. And at the very end of this arc, we see that Oob is flying on it too. Again, this is all Toriyama's way of showing us that Gohan is, in fact, the main character. That's why we're reintroduced to him in the story. Everything has changed, but unfortunately, Toriyama gave up on Gohan as the main character. He brought Goku back. He decided to make him the main character again. And the thing is that Goku, well, he was played out at the end of the Cell Saga. He was already played out at the end of Frieza, and even before that, you can argue. The entire Dragon Ball story of Dragon Ball Z up until now, Gohan was being placed in that main character position, whereas Goku was being sidelined. He was killed at the start of the Saiyan Saga. He was, sidelined with the heart virus. On Namek, in between those two things, which would make more sense to say that beforehand. But at Namek, he was, taken out multiple times, along the way until he fought Frieza. So, Goku's death led to Gohan being the main character. But Toriyama said, in an interview that he didn't know that Gohan was necessarily suited for the role. He changed his mind. I disagree. I think that this is one of the biggest mistakes, if not the biggest mistake, Toriyama ever made, to regress Gohan into being a side character again. And we've seen the damage done, where he just keeps going through this loop again and again and again, this cycle of not training and then training, of not being the strongest, then being the strongest. And it just ruined Gohan's character and really stagnated the series and made Goku, a character who is just not really compelling to watch as the main character of the story. Which in turn leads into the next thing, that Goku should have stayed dead. Yes, that's right, guys. When Goku sacrificed his life at the end of the Cell Saga, near the end of the Cell games, Goku chose to remain dead. This was in order to, again, cement what I had just said before, that Gohan would be the next character. And so the next main character, the next point of view, primary protagonist of the story. And thus, he even makes a noble sacrifice, which for me was the perfect end for him. He talks right here saying that, he's the one who kind of tracks bad guys there, which many times he has. He's the one that led Frieza and King Cool to come to the Earth in order to, sacrifice, in order to destroy it so that Goku, would be super upset when he got there and they thought they would kill him, but they didn't. And then, of course, he says that he's going to go and he doesn't want to be brought back to life, and that, everything's going to be safe in the hands of Gohan. And we see that. We see like the iconic scene of Goku, waving from the vision in the clouds. And then what do we see at the very end of the arc? Everyone is looking on to the bright future. People go their own way. The story is basically wrapped up perfectly. And what do we see here again? Them all looking on. Gohan here, the living character in the main role, and Goku here, the dead character of the past. The next generation firmly takes over. Everyone looks on to the bright future, and speaking of a bright future, well, Trunks, another great main character of the story, he also has his own ending, killing the villains and leaving everything up. Even this chapter is called One More Conclusion. Everything is at peace. It's all over. A great conclusion. But then, of course, in the Buu Saga, like I just said before, Goku is brought back to life. And it undoes so much of what Toriyama had done at the end of that arc by bringing back his prior main character. And not just that, but, replacing Gohan as the main character with a more bland, flanderized version of Goku that we see in Super and GT, and just making the story nowhere near as interesting or compelling as it was up until this point because of that. Because of the regression and because of the fact that Goku, well, they never really do much with his progression and character development other than, well, have him being even more of a flat character than he was before. So that's another hot take that I agree with, and probably will do a whole video about that in the future. Again, another one too, that Dragon Ball Z for me, and a lot of people probably should just ended with Cell. This is a whole other video I've considered doing in the past, and I probably will. A lot of these are things I've actually thought of doing as their own videos because, well, they kind of can take up a video in and of itself. But the truth is that I think that, again, like I said before, the ending of the Cell Saga was perfect. The perfect villain and also the perfect ending. I mean, think about everything that happens. Goku, the prior main character, has died and he's moving on. Before that, what happens? Well, Vegeta, his rival, and the person whose entire goal was to kill and defeat Goku and everything like that, he says that he was totally defeated and broken because of the situation. And what do we see? Vegeta says, "I'll never fight again." And not just that, but the character who was the amalgamation of all the prior characters, heroes and villains alike, was defeated and killed by Gohan. Furthermore, what do we see? Well, we see everyone say their goodbyes after they use the dragon again. Not only with Goku, but also we have Tien later on, where he tells everyone that he's probably never going to see everyone again. And so, talk to you all later. He says that right here, actually. And everyone says goodbye. The story ends, like I said before, with everyone looking on to the bright future of what could be, and then with Trunks also getting his own conclusion to end the arc. The character who, came from a timeline that was destroyed and ravaged, through his actions in the past, was able to save it. And then everything, it's done. We even have a big story skip 7 years later with what we see again right here. And it's like a whole new story begins, a whole new series. And honestly, I think that's what should have happened. If Dragon Ball Z was going to continue, or Dragon Ball as a franchise, they should have ended Z with the Cell Saga, kind of like what we saw with the end of Dragon Ball Kai, Dragon Ball Z Kai. It ends right there, with Trunks defeating his androids, with Gohan having killed Cell, Goku going off to the distance, into the greater training of the unknown that we'll never get to see. And really, all these things being left up to the imagination was far better than anything we got afterward. Far better than the Buu Saga, than GT, than Super, than Superhero, than all these video games and movies and everything like that. Nothing ever lived up to the end of the Cell Saga or the great promise of what would be to come. And I thought that that would have been a far better conclusion as a result, because of the fact that, well, again, what exactly did we see here involving everything? Well, the promise of what was to come. Gohan firmly cemented, unlocked all his potential, the strongest now, Vegeta giving up, the other characters from the past making their way, into a peaceful life. It's all good. It's all done. No more necessary. And so that's why I think they should just ended it there. The perfect conclusion to the franchise. It would have made, Dragon Ball that much better overall, having ended there, even though a lot of people don't like that because they like as much content as possible. And of course, also, everything we got in the Buu Saga, which let a lot of people down and which inevitably led to the regression of everything I mentioned earlier, well, that never would have happened. So that's why I think, again, Dragon Ball Z should have ended with Cell. Big hot take, but also something I agree with. That leads into another one, which, well, I guess we'll see if I agree or not. A live-action Dragon Ball Z movie not only should be made, but it can work. Now, we have seen Dragon Ball movies in the past. Like, for example, you could see right here with, well, Dragon Ball Evolution. This is the first thing that comes to people's mind, even though there was a movie made many years before this called Dragon Ball The Magic Begins. You can even see it for free on certain streaming services, maybe even on the platform we're on right now. And so the truth is that every time they've done it thus far, and really most anime adaptations, they've been bad. And that's a lot because of the fact that, well, you can argue that some of these things can't be adapted to live action. As a big Lord of the Rings fan, I heard that for decades. And then guess what? They did it, and it ended up being one of the most Oscar-winningest, they invented a word there, series of all time, and the Marvel movies, like, not DC, unfortunately, but the Marvel movies, for the most part, we heard, they could never do these right. They didn't have the technology, the ability, whatever, but really they did, up until a point to where, creative oversight and the executive meddling started to ruin everything, which is the reason why most anime adaptations and adaptations in general fail. Because like with Dragon Ball Evolution, they thought they could do better than Toriyama. They thought they knew better. They didn't even allow Toriyama to oversee. And that's the reason why Super, and with Battle of Gods at least, happened in the first place, because he was so angry and disenfranchised that his ideas as the creator of this was rejected, that he decided to be involved with what Toei was doing again with that movie, and then, bring about the Dragon Ball Renaissance, if you will. And so not just that, but additionally, again, these movies, they did poorly. They were adapted by Americans who didn't understand the source material or care, who thought they could do better. The list goes on and on. Additionally, the technology wasn't quite there at the time compared to today. Nowadays, they can do everything visually that they could have done in the past. Nowadays, they have way better hopefully, ability to learn from their past mistakes. And so if it was handled by extremely competent people, if it was in turn created by people who had passion for this, who were fans, who understood the franchise, who involved Toriyama and the people in the past with it, who had oversight over it, that were able to make sure it did well, then it could possibly be good. But unfortunately, as we've seen time and time and time again with almost every single adaptation of anime, they always end up being bad because of the fact that, well, the people behind them always think they could do better, they always make tons of changes, and they always in turn end up making a mess. And so that's why I think that it could be happening, or, in the future probably will happen. It's one of the biggest franchises ever. They're going to do it. But, I think that they could make it work, but will they actually make it work? That's a whole different question. And for me, if the answer is no, then I'd rather it never be made at all. So this is one that I lean in a lot of ways toward no, but also at the same time, well, I think it could be done well. It just is, one quintillion chance or something. One in whatever Goku's power level chance is at this point in Dragon Ball Super. And this is what leads into, well, the biggest hot take perhaps of all, which is, for Dragon Ball fans at least, the idea that somebody doesn't like Dragon Ball Z Abridged. And I know, guys, I know. Dragon Ball Z Abridged, well, it has so many memes and it's so beloved in the fandom, and it's introduced a lot of people to it. And the thing is, though, that there's a lot of people in the fandom who don't like Abridged, who don't enjoy it, and who really aren't into it. And the truth be told is that overall, if I'm going to talk about my own personal opinions here, well, I'm not really a fan of Abridged either. I know, blasphemy. I'm going to be stoned, well, more so than usual. And also, not just that, but I'm also going to be burned at the stake. I'm going to be cast out of the fandom. But for me, I'm a fan of Dragon Ball, the franchise. I'm a fan of the manga and the anime, but not really a lot of fan things. Not fan mangas, not fan fiction, and not fan dubs. The truth of the matter is that I've tried Dragon Ball Abridged. I watched it when it was coming out. I watched up until a certain point, but it never resonated with me. I never thought it was really all that funny. I never really enjoyed watching it anywhere near as much as the other story. And for me, the fact of the matter is that, well, if I'm going to watch Dragon Ball, I'm just going to watch the real one. I'm going to watch the anime in Japanese, or even depending upon the English dub, the English dub, and I will watch the story itself. When your time is so limited in life, as it is for me, as somebody who runs businesses and who works on so many things and loves and is passionate about so many other franchises out there, if I'm going to devote my time in life to watching things and being entertained, I'm not going to really spend it watching, fan dubs of something. I'm instead going to spend that time watching the real thing. I'd rather hear the words that Toriyama wrote, or that the voice actors from the Japanese and the English are saying. I don't want to hear meta jokes and, spoof things that are inserted into the story. I would much rather, just watch and read the real thing. And for a lot of people in this fandom, they actually do consider Dragon Ball Z Abridged like its own version of the story, which it isn't. And so that's one of the things, too, that as a longtime fan of the franchise, over 30 years now at this point, somebody who loves Dragon Ball, as one of my all-time favorite franchises, and who talks about it passionately, I can't really get behind that as much. For me, it disappoints me when I see channels on YouTube reacting to Dragon Ball Z Abridged as if it's as equal as the manga, the anime, that was created by Shueisha, Toei, and Toriyama, and who that's their only introduction to the franchise. And that a lot of times I'll see in the comments, people refer to Dragon Ball Z Abridged as its own legitimate version of the story, when it isn't. It's not at the same level. It certainly isn't its own canon like Dragon Ball Z, the anime, or, the manga. And the truth of the matter is, too, that as a Dragon Ball creator on YouTube, and as somebody who, actually likes to break down and analyze things in the story, some of the memes have become, kind of annoying. I mean, I can't go a single video without talking about something power level related or power scaling without getting 100 comments that say power levels are bullshit, to where I actually just started to filter that out of my comments because I was tired of reading it and tired of people using a meme in order to try and, delegitimize what I was talking about. I understand the strengths and weaknesses of the story. I understand that, certain things make sense and don't, and that Toriyama discarded ideas, for sure. But does that mean that, saying a meme automatically invalidates them? Not quite. And a lot of times people who were casuals, who were introduced to Dragon Ball, or who have never actually seen the original anime or read the manga, because, they know of Abridged, they think that that's what the characters are really like. They think that these memes are actually legitimate parts of the story when they're not. So overall, as somebody who loves the franchise, I don't really love Dragon Ball Abridged. And, if you're a fan of it, if it makes you happy, if it entertains you, that's fine, that's cool. But for me, I'm not really in that field. I'm not somebody who really enjoys it that much. I've referenced it from time to time because I know my fans do, and people who watch my videos. But nonetheless, for me, I could definitely see this being the biggest hot take on this list, especially as I am a Dragon Ball YouTuber, as many people like to refer to me, and as the YouTube has kind of pigeonholed me into being, and the algorithm at least. And as a result, I could definitely see why I left that for number one, or the most hottest take, hotter than Century's supernova attack or whatever, when Goku blew up the sun with Cooler inside of it, and somehow everyone in the universe, or solar system at least, didn't die. So for me, I don't really like Dragon Ball Abridged that much, but hey, if you do, more power to you. more power levels because they're not bullshit. But either way, guys, this has been the biggest hot takes in Dragon Ball Z, or really about it. The fact of the matter is, you'll have to let me know down below if you think that order was, well, correct, or if you think that maybe on your list things would be in a totally different one, or maybe you would chop some of these off, put your own. Let me see your own 10 down there, or really any of them in general. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you like it, unless you unsubscribe because some of these takes being too hot for you. And, you could always resubscribe. But with that being said, as I always say, make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.